So you're going to be mapping Lane County zoning or Lane County vegetation, and so you're going to want to turn off the Oregon zoning, or remove the Oregon zoning, and you're going to want to zoom in to Lane County so that that is as big as it possibly can be. I'm going to turn that gray to kind of set it out. So that's what the extent of my map. Because I know this is water, I can go to my properties on my data frame, and I can go to the frame properties and choose kind of a light blue for water if I want, and I can simulate having water on my map. So if I were, but I'm going to demonstrate looking at Oregon zoning. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these off, and I'm going to zoom to this layer, and I don't want and I'm actually going to turn those off for right now because I don't need them. I'm going to activate, no, I'm going to design the map from here. I'm going to take that off of mine because I don't need an inset map when I'm doing all of Oregon. Okay, so yours is going to look a little different. So I'm going to turn on Oregon zoning. I can turn that off. And I'm going to open this up and go into my properties and symbology. And you can see that all of these polygons are symbolized as a single feature. Just kind of the location of the feature. I could change that symbol selector and make everything pink if I wanted, but I'm not going to. I want to map categories. So I'm going to click on categories, and then the computer wants to know which field do I want to map. So if I selected counties and said add all values, I'm just going to map the different types by their county, which is kind of not very helpful as far as understanding zoning. So I actually want to map the land use, and I'm going to choose add all values, and I should have those 12 values for land use. And I can choose one of the default color sets if I want. That's really horrible. The defaults aren't so good. So I'm going to go back to pastels for now. Apply. I'm going to say OK. And so what I notice here is that some of these little areas, I'm going to zoom into this for a second, some of these little areas aren't showing up very much because of the outline of the polygon. So one thing that I can do that would be helpful is to right click and go into properties, and in symbol properties for all symbols, I can turn off that outline color, and sometimes that is really helpful. Let's go back to zoom to layer. Sometimes that's helpful for looking at areas where there's really small differentiation. Now, the reason you're doing Lane County and not the whole state is because it'll be a lot easier to symbolize Lane County this way. So now I want to try to make these colors make a little more sense. So agriculture, forestry, I might go ahead and choose a little different green for that forestry and see what that makes my, oh, that helps. Indian reservations, rural commercial, often that's a pretty, a little bit brighter color. Maybe that would help that pop out a little bit, not so much. Residential and agricultural natural resources, there aren't many of those, but I'm going to go ahead and put that in a darker green. Oh, they do show up a little bit. Urban areas, I'm going to make those urban areas pretty dark gray, and then they show up differently. So you can really kind of have to play around with some of these land use types or vegetation types to really make your map show up and be distinctive. The other thing that you can do is you can change the order. Sorry about that. Properties. Let's say I want the urban to be at the top, so I can just move this up. I could move agriculture up with the regular agriculture. So you can have some say in how your legend appears on your map. And then you're going to insert your legend. And I've got zoning, roads, and river. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and just keep it. So one of the difficult things with mapping this area is that you've got a lot of categories and they can take over your map. So you're going to make sure that you let's go in here. We're going to open up this and this would be helpful if I could get this in two rows. So under items, I can say I want that to be in 2 columns. Does that help? Maybe I want it to be in 3 columns. That might be useful, so I could do that. I could shrink that down a little bit. If I want to know if that's still readable, I can go to 100% and scroll down and say, okay, that's pretty readable. I've got weird names for some of this, so I've got or zoning and land_use, which can't be in my field. So again, I can go into my legend properties. Oh, that was the legend properties. And I can, let's see, where am I going? I'm going into or zoning. I can go into item or zoning and go into style. And let's say I don't want the field name to show up. All I want is, or maybe I just want land use and I don't need zoning, because I could put zoning in the title. Layer name and description, heading with a label. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, oh, so that did land use. So if I just go ahead and change that, I can do that. Or zoning doesn't show up, so that's pretty nice. Now I've got my roads and rivers under here, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that as well. So I'm going to put roads in a new column. Okay, so there you go. So now I've got my roads and rivers in a new column, and they don't look so weird with my I just want to do major roads here. I'm going to call that major roads. And that should update. Okay, so now because I have a lot of information underneath this, I'm going to add a frame and a background to my legend. So I'm going to add a neat line. And I want to add a background, so I'm just going to, I'm pretty boring, so I'm going to add white. Now, the problem with just doing that is everything is crowded up against the edge of my legend. So, my legend boxes. So, I'm going to add a gap all around. I'm going to add a gap in the border. If I don't add a gap in the background, then it looks very odd. So, I'm going to go back and make sure I add a gap in the border and the neat line. So now my legend is readable pretty much. I would probably mess around with the colors a little bit. I'm going to go back and zoom to that layer. And I'm going to zoom to the whole page here. So now I'm going to add my title. I could probably even get a little smaller with my legend and still be pretty readable. North arrow, scale bar, title, my name, the projection, and the source information. So remember, you can't, if you put your stuff all the way to the edge, when you try a print preview, let's see what the print preview looks like. Oh, I'm in the wrong layout. Ah, okay. So the other thing I'm going to have to do is page and print preview. And you can see that my paper is landscape, but my map thinks it is portrait. So I've got to change that to landscape. Choose OK. And now let's see what that does. File, print preview. There we go. I'm better. But when I print that, this is going to get printed, get cut off. So you want to make sure that you have kind of a 1/4 inch of white space on all edges of your map, so that, oops, and then I'm going to go move everything down a little bit. You want to make sure you maintain that 1/4 inch white space so things don't get cut off your map. Okay.